Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagano, and welcome back to another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's favorite conservative podcast. Once again, we are back here in studio with John Hendrickson and Chris Ingstad, and we have another wonderful episode for you today. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, it's really good to be here, Chris.
That's what I want. I just come strong right out of the gate. John?
It is. It's great to be here.
It is. I know it is. Okay, we've got a lot of ground to cover today. We're going to be kind of all over the place here, but we're recording this on a Thursday afternoon, and today is one of the best days of the year. It's Kickoff the Iowa State Fair. So will you gentlemen be attending the State Fair this year? The answer is yes. I plan on going multiple times. I can't wait.
I don't know. I've yet to attend the state fair.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Nobody's been able to point out where the Swedish meatballs are. And John doesn't do a fair unless he could find the Swedish meatballs.
Yeah.
If we had enough people watching this on YouTube, this is where I would just drop everything and just walk out of the room. But sadly, no one's watching and no one will get it on the audio only version of this. So we'll go through it.
Maybe the first podcast we do next week should be from the fair.
That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Okay. John, do you want to lug all the equipment in for us?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. Well, look, I love the Iowa State Fair, and I'll be out there. My family's out there right now. I'll be out there several times, I hope, over the course of next week. And there's a lot of political activity at the fair, and so it is relevant to what's going on here in the news in Iowa. But my take on the Iowa State Fair is there is no better opportunity to see what Iowa is in the breadth of things that Iowa has to offer. It's just a slice of Iowa, and it's wonderful, and I love everything about it. And if you can't find something to do or see that's of interest to you at the Iowa State Fair, then you aren't trying very hard, because there's all kinds of stuff, and you just have to look a little bit below the surface, and it's all right there. Now, it's hot. It's tiring. There's a million people out there. Sometimes that's not a lot of fun, but it's great. My daughter's out at vet camp today. So, because she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. So she's at vet camp today. That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So
does she like I don't know what they call it, the barn at the state fair where all the birthing is going on?
Oh yeah. That's definitely the animal. Is that the Animal Learning Center?
No.
There's a lot of political events that happen actually in that building, but there's a lot to do there, and
the jokes write themselves. But
yeah, they do. But okay, well, so on to the political activity. So. If you're not as familiar with sort of the day-to-day at the fair, there's the kind of the different things that presidential candidates do, other elected officials do, but one of the big ones has historically been the Des Moines Register soapbox, which is right out there in front of the main grandstand. Looks like quite a few candidates are taking that opportunity, although more of them seem to be skipping that, and frankly, I don't blame them. But the governor is having what she calls her Fairside chats this year. So I don't know, did you see that?
I did,
yeah. And so different candidates coming in and sitting down with the governor. Frankly, I'd rather talk to Governor Reynolds and stand on some straw bales and get heckled by people on the concourse, but that's just me. But one of the other things is the Iowa Secretary of State has a straw poll they take, a fair voter. And that's a little different. In the past, it was Channel 13 would do it with the corn kernel. You see that? Well, they don't do that anymore. So if you want to vote, you go inside of the Variant Industries building to the Secretary of State's booth, and it's just right there on some iPad stations, and you can vote. That's it. It's fun. It's a chance to participate. I like it. No word yet whether President Trump will be there in the helicopter. That was from past episodes.
I did hear that he's attending.
Yes,
but I don't know how. I mean, or if he's coming in the helicopter.
Because he did that in the past.
Yes,
There's an article in the Wall Street Journal that I saw of kind of the do's and don'ts, the Iowa State Fair for these presidential candidates. And
don't eat a corn dog.
Don't eat a corn dog. That's the famous Rick Perry moment. Well, there's actually multiple famous Rick Perry moments, but that's one of the and I love Rick Perry. Let's see what else is on that list. Don't ride in a golf cart. Like the rest of everybody else is kind of just hoofing it along. You don't need to ride in a golf cart. Or as Fred Thompson famously did, wear your designer loafers.
Business will get out of control. It'll get out of control, and we'll be lucky to live through it.
Oh, did you like that one?
That was good.
Hunt for Red October.
Yeah.
This business will get out of control.
It's right. It's when the guy that's trying to land in the aircraft carrier and he crashes. And that's when Alec Baldwin decides to get the helicopter ride out and actually jump off and get into the Red October.
Yeah, Chris.
Great scene.
We're patriots. We know it.
The listeners might not know the exact reference, so we'll give it to them. Anyway, so don't do those things. I didn't know this until I read the article. John Kerry, I guess, famously had his fair food was a strawberry smoothie, and that was like I don't associate that as a fair food, but I don't know if I'd really criticize someone for wanting to have a strawberry smoothie on a hot day.
Well, I'm not critical of the strawberry smoothie, but again, it's not exactly a fair food.
Well, it's not. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't scream populism. Like
No.
I don't know. I was thinking of this, and I was going to put you guys on the spot of what your favorite fair food was. Like, if you're the presidential candidate, like, what would Herbert Hoover eat at the Iowa State Fair, John? I guess that's the question. Do they have like Hoover dogs or something?
If they did, you would defend them and promote them in the Des Moines Register.
I would. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
you'd probably want a steak of some sort.
Yeah. I love the Cattleman's beef quarters. That's kind of a staple for us when we go out there. Get a good hamburger, do a good job. One of my favorites actually left a couple years ago, which was G. Miggs, was a sandwich wrap place from Valley Junction. They had great stuff. But a new one this year that I'm really excited about is Over the Top Ice Cream, which is an ice cream shop in Pleasant Hill. Is now got a stand at the State Fair. It's right by the Riley stage. So that's my new 2023 ITR Live podcast recommendations. Check out Over the Top Ice Cream. So you still didn't answer the question. What would Herbert Hoover have at the State Fair?
I think he would probably have a steak of some sort.
How did Herbert Hoover take his steak, John?
I don't know.
That surprises me.
Yeah.
Would you get to West Branch sooner than later, John?
Yeah. That's your next research assignment,
We
John.
have asked for Hoover research, and that little fact needs to go to the top of the list.
I know if I was going out, I would look for the Swedish meatballs.
Yeah.
Because that was my favorite thing to get at the Minnesota State Fair.
You know what? If I can find a Swedish meatball vendor at the State Fair, would you go out and try it?
I would, yeah.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Yeah. Again, like listeners help us out. We'll send you some ITR merch if you can point us towards the Swedish meatball tent.
Swedish meatballs at the Iowa State Fair. That's your challenge. Okay, great. Well, good. You mentioned, Chris, that John had a letter in the Des Moines Register about Hoover recently. He got some people that...
Well, he had an actual op-ed.
Yeah.
He had some people who were apparently unpatriotic, Iowa-hating Iowans who wrote in and tried to disparage both President Hoover and John.
Well, at the same time, I mean, my sense of that was, how dare you criticize the New Deal?
Yeah.
And how dare you... criticize the massive expansion of federal government spending.
To be clear, one of those guys credited the New Deal with saving democracy across the world, and I would suggest it was more like people like our grandfathers, and frankly the overall sacrifice of our country at the time,
right?
That did it, not Roosevelt's big spending plan, but
right.
Because Band of Brothers, was that about like Roosevelt's
about the Tennessee Valley Authority? No,
it was not. It was
no.
not. Okay, so
yeah. Okay, good.
And I should note today is Herbert Hoover's birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, August 10th.
Well, I would have come more prepared.
Yeah,
if I'd have known. Instead, all I got is Fred Thompson quotes.
That's all.
Which was like not to like. I was so proud of the Fred Thompson quotes.
How did Fred Thompson square his designer loafers with his truck that he drove all over campaigning?
I don't know. It was
maybe not authentic, John.
That could be.
I still loved Fred Thompson. Okay, so. One other thing kind of associated with the State Fair. Again, we're doing this on a Thursday afternoon, but tonight, which if you're listening to us on Friday would have been yesterday, but the Ruthless podcast, Friends of the ITR Live podcast, will be here in town helping to kick off the Iowa State Fair. And
frankly, we're helping to kick off the Ruthless podcast.
Yep, we're happy to be a part of that event. And so I guess I'll try and, for those of you that are part of it, I hope it's a good time. I think those guys are an important voice in the conservative movement. and
They'll be showcasing Governor Reynolds and Senator Ernst. Excuse me.
Yep.
And I think they're also planning on having Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Yep. So a little national flavor, a little local flavor, and should be a good time.
No, I think it'll be a great event. One other thing that was in the news a little bit, and we try and mix this up. It's not just Iowa news, but some national stuff. But there was sometimes August is a little slow for political news, but in Ohio the other day they had a ballot measure to amend their constitution. So every state is different in how you can amend the Constitution. And in Ohio, it's a petition-driven thing, and then 50% on the ballot. And this was a proposal to raise that threshold to 60% to make it harder to amend the Constitution, and it failed by I think surprisingly surprising margin of defeat, let's say. But did you guys follow this at all?
I did. It gets a little bit clunky trying to explain it because the issue at hand was just does the referendum require 50% or are they going to up it to 60? But I think a lot of people had in mind the next referendum item that's coming up in Ohio, which this new standard would be applied to.
That's right. And I guess we'll come back around to sort of the philosophical things, but that's right. There is a pro-life measure or pro-choice, I don't know where the author of it, and an abortion measure that was scheduled to be on the ballot this fall. And so those quickly became attached as trying to make it, I guess, more difficult to add the pro-choice thing to the state constitution in Ohio or Ohio.
I think.
Right. But anyway, but whatever it is, it seems like quickly these things, and the left is really good at it, is attaching everything to abortion, that's the thing. And so then they struggle to get it done. I actually, oddly enough, last week happened to spend a night in the Cincinnati TV market and saw an ad for this. I was like, well, what's this thing about? And it was, flashy production TV ad about it, and thought they did a nice job with their TV ads at least, but it failed. Presumably because that was attached to the conventional wisdom is because they successfully made that about abortion. I would submit that there's a pretty high bar for amending your constitution. I think the average voter, regardless of where they're at on the issue spectrum, is reluctant to add new things to a constitution, which ironically was what this thing was about, was, protect our constitution. Don't make, they were trying to make it harder to amend it. But, John, you've done a lot of research work at state level stuff, but I mean, I know specifically in Minnesota, but have you seen some of these ballot measures around the country? Not anything specifically, but it seems and I guess the reason where I'm going with this question is my perspective is that it is often the playground for the progressive left to try and get their agenda done.
It is,
some of these ballot measures.
And that's a danger with direct democracy because it can go either way. But I think if people want to look at an extreme example of this is California.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at how many ballot initiatives they have, and their constitution is very elastic.
Well, to be clear, not every ballot measure is necessarily amend the Constitution, right?
No, I'm extrapolating this out a little bit. Yeah,
just to clarify.
But in California,
it adds.
Yeah, and I think North Dakota has a similar system.
Yeah, there's a lot of states that have initiative and referendums.
Right.
The INR that, and this goes back, really early 20th century when the progressives really pushed for these reforms as a way for more small d democracy for people to get involved in. And I would say that, our founding fathers had it right when they framed the Constitution, that making it very hard to amend, and it should be. And so I'm very suspicious of efforts to have more direct democracy, because I think it can be dangerous in many ways.
Yeah. I agree with that, John. And yes, Chris, I think it becomes kind of a playground for activists. And without doing the research, for all I know, in some states, it's right-leaning activists. I don't know. And again, whether we're talking about the Constitution or just sort of state law, there's a reason that generally speaking, we set it up with this process where elected officials make those decisions, and there's a process it all goes through, right? And unfortunately, in some states that have the ability to have a ballot referendum, that ceases to become the exception and almost more the rule, right? I mean, it seems like California always has a handful of things that are on the ballot. So the spirit of that, John, I've got to believe was the intent that, geez, if the elected officials have totally gone off the rail doing something so that the citizen like has to step in, like I could probably get behind that if that's the spirit. But in practice, that's not how it's playing out in so many places. And I think we're better off in Iowa with our system. And I guess I'll just point out, too, as we talk about democracy, and we're all in favor of democracy, generally speaking, but our country's a republic, not a democracy, right? Our country is not actually majority rule, although that's the standard for a lot of things. All we're really guaranteed as a republic is that we have certain rights that, in fact, that the majority can't trample.
I remember talking.
So let's not get carried away with democracy, is my point.
I remember a few years ago, I was at a conference with some different legislative leaders and just struck up a conversation with, I can't remember where they were from, but they were talking about these ballot measures. And sometimes it's not even the major conservative versus progressive issue, but they would really struggle with, okay, this measure passed. What do we do with it now? Because now we have to respond to that, and you're stuck with whatever language was passed. And it may not have been the right language. There's all the time in the legislature, there's a proposed language of a bill, and it may just be technically flawed, or it may have some impact that no one considered, but it doesn't go through that process, because as long as somebody gets the required signatures to put something on the ballot, it's on the ballot, and then that language is locked in place. And so they had several examples of how they had to try and backtrack or come around with other legislation to try and fix it. And that's part of the benefit, as frustrated as many people often get, myself included, with lawmaking and the legislative process, is that it does actually exist for a reason, which is to refine things and to make them better. You may not agree with the end product, but the legislation itself will be much more ready for prime time because it's been through that level of scrutiny. And so, yes, I agree with you both on that. As a reminder for folks of how it works in Iowa, is we sort of have both, is that to amend the concept, we do not have any kind of ballot referendum in Iowa. You cannot get enough signatures to get an issue on the ballot. And the only way to do anything by public measure or a public vote is a constitutional amendment process. But that has to be passed by 2 consecutive general assemblies, which means not just 2 years, but 2 general assemblies, which means there has to be an intervening election. So you pass both chambers, both chambers, and then it goes on the ballot for a simple majority. It's really hard to amend the Constitution in Iowa. And every once in a while we get one through on this, that, or the next thing. But at least in my experience, since I've been involved, it's usually on, I guess, relatively minor things or things that are clearly supported by everyone, because it is so difficult to go through that process. Whereas in other states, you can just throw whatever you want up on the ballot and see what sticks. And I don't think that's good. So I bring this all up by way of saying that I think Iowa has a great system on this, even if it is sometimes frustrating that it's difficult to amend the Constitution, but it should be hard to amend the Constitution. It should be hard to pass a law, frankly.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so you see this in Ohio. You see legislators there trying to adapt to a system where it's too easy to do these things via the ballot. And just be thankful that in Iowa we have a pretty good system. We really do. On a lot of fronts, we do. Yeah, good. Not only do we have a great state fair, we've got a great constitutional amendment process. It's really good. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, gentlemen, anything else before we sign off? Swedish Meatball Challenge for the ITR Live listeners. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to visit the Great Iowa State Fair this year. Stop and say hi if you see me or my crazy kids out there. But look forward to seeing you, and we look forward to seeing you next time on ITR Live.